Hello and welcome. In this video, I'll be jumping right into my sketchbook and I'll share how I go about drawing faces and figures. I'll be mixing some different art supplies today and also sharing some tips on color. Before I begin working in my sketchbook, I find it super important to prepare all of my supplies prior to beginning. This way, I'm not shuffling through any of the colors that I need or tools, and everything is at hand and ready to go. I love mixing all different art supplies, so today I was really craving to use some colored pencils along with these new markers I received from Ohuhu. They are also kindly sponsoring today's video. These are dual tip water-based markers and I'm really excited to try them out. I have already swatched them to see the colors that I can be working with, and I'm interested to see how they perform. Now, it can be quite overwhelming when we have so much color around and we have no idea which color to pick. So what helps me a ton is using my Color Harmony book, which is a book full of all different sorts of color palettes. And they're mostly limited to 3. This really helps me narrow down which color palette I want to use. You know I love a limited color palette. So I spend some time picking a color palette first before sketching. And sometimes I close my eyes and just flip to a random page. Then what I love to do is to look at my swatch chart, whether it's watercolor or markers or pencils, whatever medium it is, I then match it to the color palette that I chose. This is a great tip to include in your practice, that way you are limiting yourself to these colors and then you're all set to begin sketching. I'm starting off with a portrait and I'm really focusing on just the shapes that I see in my reference. When it comes to markers, I really love just going in right away without pencil, and I always start off with the lightest color I chose of the color palette. This way, I'm laying down a foundation of a very, very light tone, and then I can work on layering the other color over that. This is a process I personally love to use, and I like to apply it to markers and watercolors, and today is all about just experimenting and playing in my sketchbook, so I'll be switching around with some fun techniques as well. With every page and drawing I create in my sketchbook, I really like to try to push myself outside of my comfort zone, try something new, or include something that I really loved from a previous page. This way, I'm really working on just having fun and developing my art style at the same time. I like to think of the markers as a little foundation base layer, and I absolutely love mixing mediums, so all while sticking to the palette I chose, I begin adding some shadows and a little bit of definition with my pencil. And after, I layer once again back and forth with some marker on top. And I'm carefully picking and choosing where I want that definition to exist. I also then add some warmth to the cheeks and the nose, and as I'm building up all of the values and details in the portrait, I then spend some time doing some minor details before I can call the sketch finished. So here I'm just finishing off the portrait with some ballpoint pens. In previous videos of mine, I've mentioned how much I love sketching with these and how great of a tool they are to draw. I always love using these. Sometimes I prefer them rather than a pencil. And for this next drawing, I really wanted to do a figure with a kind of a warm palette. So I went back over to my book to decide on a color choice and decided to experiment with a gradient. After I laid down a super quick foundation sketch, I began blending in the markers from orange to dark red, and I created a gradient from the top of the figure to the bottom. And I was really impressed with the way that the markers were blending into one another, almost like watercolor. And in contrary to the first portrait where I used some complementary colors, here I decided to use a monochromatic color scheme. This is the beauty of keeping a sketchbook where you can actually just do whatever you enjoy, and with each experiment in drawing, you can learn something new. Alright, for the next drawing, I really wanted to do another portrait playing with this gradient effect. Looking back now, I realized I chose blue, red, and now I was using yellows to orange tones, coincidentally making the primaries. But as you can see, I'm just filling in this whole shape with this neutral light color, and immediately I'm forming out the shadow shapes that I see in the face. This is a stylistic choice, of course, and also great to train your mind to see in shapes rather than line. I then take my next color, which is yellow, and literally cover the whole thing and layer it once more. Limiting your colors will really help you create stronger sketches where you're actually going to be able to distinguish the values easier. So once again, I laid down a foundation sketch of the lighter colors, and then I'm slowly building up the darker values. If you've been watching my videos, you know that this is a process that I love to take, and this also works really well with watercolor. And yep, the ballpoint pen is back. It's just such a great tool for definition. My goal for this portrait was to really keep it loose and blended, but in select areas really pick out some details. When I'm drawing, I really like to make sure I'm consciously making some decisions. However, I also make room to make sure that I'm doing anything that just feels natural. As always, I preach for intuition to lead the way. Now I found the water-based markers to work really well because there was a brush tip, and on the other side there is a fine liner. I decided to utilize this to my advantage and just add a little bit of cross-hatching in areas to see if I can punch out some details like I do with a ballpoint pen, and I just enjoy doing this to create just a little bit more texture. Now I realized I probably should have done this sooner, but I decided to swatch out all of my color palettes next to the drawing, and a sudden idea came to my mind to use a really bright highlighter color and punch out those bright highlights. I also began to see a pattern in my color palette choices, and this was not intentional, but I saw some primaries there. Alright, so we've already done 2 portraits, so now let's do one more figure drawing. To switch it up once more, I'm just using a ballpoint pen to lay in my foundation shapes. And in this moment, I make sure to move my hand relatively quickly so that I just have the placement and I'm not getting too caught up in the details. I want to leave this part to explore when I'm using my markers and other mediums. Once I have a relatively vague pose down, I start to pick out slightly some definition with my pen, and I was craving some green neutral tones here. So I swatched them out at the very bottom before beginning and went right to, yes, the neutral tone as the start. Then I go into my next value, which is this minty green color, and slowly develop those next shadow shapes. And after that, I take my next darkest color and carefully pick and choose the shapes that I create with this tone. As I was sketching, an intuitive thought came to mind to use a completely complementary color like red. It's a complementary color from green since it's opposite from each other on the color wheel. So I just ran with this intuitive thought and created some really brighter shadows with the red right against the green, and I found that this really brought the drawing together. As I'm drawing, I'm realizing how much I missed just spending time in my sketchbook and creating whatever I kind of was craving, and I was really happy to practice some figures and portraits today. Although I have done so many in the sketchbook tours that you have seen, I still find it important to revisit some subjects that you enjoy drawing. I always say to draw and paint what you love, and today I was reminded once again to make time for that. These were a lot of fun and I love how they came out. and I hope you enjoyed watching the video and hearing about some new tips. After finishing, I flipped through the end of my sketchbook and I realized that there's only 5 pages left, and I feel like I have just started the sketchbook. But anyways, let me know which one of these in the comments below you liked the most, and let me know what your favorite color palettes are. Here's what the finished sketchbook page looks like, and my table as well. Be sure to leave a thumbs up if you like this video, it really helps support the channel, and subscribe to join an awesome art community. I like to say thank you so much for watching. I hope you're staying creative and motivated and using all the colors that you love. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!